Daniel Harper, a self-made millionaire, sat alone in his expansive office, surrounded by sleek, minimalist decor that echoed his success but did little to fill the void inside him. Despite the wealth and accolades, Daniel felt a persistent sense of isolation, as though his achievements were a fortress keeping the world at bay rather than a bridge connecting him to others. His life was a series of meetings, business deals, and lavish parties, yet none of these filled the emptiness that seemed to grow with each passing day. As Daniel settled into his leather chair one crisp autumn morning, he noticed an envelope on his desk that hadn't been there the night before. Its presence was unusual. His secretary typically managed his correspondence with meticulous precision. The envelope was plain, unmarked, and bore no indication of its origin. Intrigued and slightly uneasy, Daniel reached for it, feeling the weight of its mystery. With a deliberate motion, he opened the envelope and pulled out a photograph. It was a picture of a young boy, no older than 6, with bright eyes and a mischievous smile. There was something hauntingly familiar about the child, a resemblance that tugged at the corners of Daniel's memory. Alongside the photograph was a note, its message simple yet earth-shattering: "This is your son." The words hit Daniel like a tidal wave, leaving him reeling in his chair. He stared at the note, then back at the photograph, trying to reconcile this revelation with his reality. His mind raced through the years, a blur of faces and names from his past relationships. Who could the mother be? How could this have happened without his knowledge? Daniel's thoughts were a chaotic whirlpool, pulling him into memories of fleeting romances and long-lost connections. He considered the women who had once been part of his life, searching for clues that might explain this unexpected revelation. Each potential answer seemed more improbable than the last, leaving him with only questions and a growing sense of responsibility. His office, usually a sanctuary of order and control, felt cold and unwelcoming in the face of this new reality. The polished surfaces and pristine lines seemed to mock his sense of detachment, reminding him of the life he'd built that now felt fragile and incomplete. The photograph of the boy was a stark contrast to this world, vibrant, full of life, and undeniably real. Daniel knew he had to find answers, to understand the truth behind the note and the photograph. But more than that, he felt a deep, instinctual need to connect with this child who was, according to the note, his son. It was a connection he'd never sought, yet now it seemed like the missing piece of his life, offering a chance to fill the void that had haunted him for so long. With determination and a newfound sense of purpose, Daniel resolved to uncover the truth about his son and the mother who had remained hidden in the shadows of his past. It was a journey he had never anticipated, but one he felt compelled to undertake, driven by a hope that this unexpected revelation might lead him to the connection he had always longed for. Daniel sat at his desk, the photograph and note still in front of him, as he contemplated his next move. The logical first step was to speak with Laura, his assistant, who managed his schedule and often handled sensitive information with discretion. If anyone could shed light on the envelope's origins, it would be her. He pressed the intercom button on his desk. "Laura, could you come in here for a moment?" Laura entered, her expression professional as always. "Yes, Daniel, what do you need?" Daniel handed her the envelope. "This was on my desk this morning. Do you know anything about it? Where it came from? Who delivered it?" Laura examined the envelope carefully, turning it over in her hands. "I haven't seen this before, Daniel. It wasn't in the mail I sorted for you yesterday." "Are you sure? I need to know who sent it. It's important." Laura looked at him, sensing the urgency in his voice. "I understand. I'll start looking into it right away. Maybe the building security cameras caught something." "Thank you, Laura. I appreciate it," Daniel said, his voice tinged with gratitude. After Laura left, Daniel leaned back in his chair, thoughts drifting to the past. His mind settled on Sarah, a woman he'd known years ago. Their relationship had been brief but intense, a whirlwind romance that ended as quickly as it began. They had lost touch, and he hadn't thought of her in years, yet something about the boy's eyes in the photograph reminded him of her. Could Sarah be the mother? The possibility lingered in his mind, stirring memories he had long buried. He remembered her laughter, the way she challenged him to be better, and the sense of loss when their paths diverged. They had been young, ambitious, and perhaps too focused on their careers to make room for each other. The thought of Sarah brought a pang of loneliness, highlighting the solitary nature of his existence. Despite the luxury that surrounded him, Daniel's life felt empty. His apartment, a sprawling testament to his success, was often silent, save for the hum of the city outside. It was a place filled with beautiful things, yet devoid of warmth and companionship. In the evenings, Daniel would often find himself standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing at the cityscape. The lights below twinkled like stars, a reminder of the world bustling with life and connection. Yet here he was, alone in his tower, surrounded by the trappings of wealth, but untouched by the simple joys of family and friendship. This revelation about a potential son was like a beacon, offering a chance to change the narrative of his life. It was a chance to break free from the isolation that had become his norm, to forge a bond that went beyond business deals and financial success. Determined to find answers, Daniel decided to reach out to Sarah. It was a step he hadn't anticipated taking, but now it seemed like the only path forward. He needed to know if she was the mother, if the boy in the photograph was truly his son. As he prepared to contact Sarah, Daniel felt a mix of hope and apprehension. The journey ahead was uncertain, but it was a journey he knew he had to take. It was a chance to discover not only the truth about the boy but perhaps also a chance to rediscover himself. Daniel knew he needed more than just his own memories to piece together the past, so he decided to reach out to someone who had known him well during his time with Sarah. That someone was Jake, an old friend who had been there through the ups and downs of that intense relationship. Jake had always been a good listener, the kind of friend who could see through the bravado and understand the heart of the matter. Daniel picked up his phone and dialed Jake's number, hoping that the years of silence hadn't eroded their friendship. After a few rings, Jake answered, his voice warm and familiar. "Daniel. It's been ages. How are you?" "Hey Jake, I'm doing all right. Listen, I was wondering if we could meet up. There's something I need to talk to you about." "Of course. I'm free this afternoon. How about we meet at that cafe we used to go to?" Daniel agreed, feeling a sense of relief. The cafe was a small, cozy place tucked away on a quiet street, a stark contrast to the opulence of his usual haunts. It was the kind of place where conversations flowed easily, where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sound of laughter and the clinking of cups. Later that afternoon, Daniel arrived at the cafe, the bell above the door jingling as he entered. The familiar warmth enveloped him, and he spotted Jake at a corner table, waving him over with a grin. "Daniel, it's good to see you," Jake said, standing up to give him a hearty handshake. "Good to see you too, Jake." "It's been too long," Daniel replied, taking a seat across from him. They chatted for a while, catching up on life and reminiscing about old times. It felt good to reconnect, to have a conversation that wasn't about business or money but about life and memories. Eventually, Daniel steered the conversation to the topic that had been weighing on his mind. "Jake, do you remember Sarah?" Jake nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Of course. You two were quite the pair." Daniel hesitated, unsure how to broach the subject. "I got this envelope the other day. It had a photo of a boy and a note saying he's my son. It got me thinking about the past, and I couldn't help but wonder if Sarah might be involved." Jake leaned back, considering Daniel's words. "Well, you and Sarah were serious for a while. I remember how much you cared about her. But you never talked much about why things ended." Daniel sighed, the memories flooding back. "We were both so focused on our careers. I guess we just drifted apart. But I never stopped caring about her." Jake nodded, understanding. "You know, I always thought you two had something special. Maybe it's worth reaching out to her, finding out if there's more to the story." Daniel appreciated Jake's candor. The way he could cut through the noise and get to the heart of things. Yeah, I think I need to do that. I just hope it's not too late. They spent the next hour reminiscing about old times, the conversation flowing easily between them. It felt good to reconnect, to have someone who understood the complexities of the past and the uncertainties of the present. As they parted ways, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew he had to find Sarah, to uncover the truth behind the photograph and the note. It was a journey he hadn't anticipated, but one he felt ready to undertake, driven by a hope that this unexpected revelation might lead him to the connection he had always longed for. Leaving the cafe, Daniel felt a sense of clarity. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years he felt like he was moving towards something meaningful. It was a chance to rediscover not only the truth about the boy but also a chance to rediscover himself and the connections that had once been so important. Daniel returned to his office with a sense of urgency, determined to find Sarah and uncover the truth. He knew he needed professional help, someone who could track her down discreetly and efficiently. With that in mind, he decided to hire a private investigator. He made a few calls and soon found himself speaking with Mark, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for thoroughness and discretion. They arranged to meet at Daniel's office later that day. As he waited for Mark's arrival, Daniel attempted to focus on work, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the photograph and the possibility of having a son. The idea was both exhilarating and terrifying, a mix of emotions he struggled to process. He found himself staring out the window, watching the city below, his mind a swirl of questions and possibilities. The intercom buzzed, jolting him back to the present. "Mr. Harper, Mark is here to see you," Laura's voice announced. "Send him in," Daniel replied, straightening up and trying to push his emotions aside. Mark entered, a tall man with a calm demeanor and a keen eye. He shook Daniel's hand firmly and took a seat, pulling out a notepad. "Thanks for seeing me on such short notice," Daniel said, trying to focus on the task at hand. "Of course. What can I do for you?" Mark asked, his tone professional yet approachable. Daniel explained the situation briefly, showing Mark the photograph and the note. "I need to find this woman, Sarah. We were involved several years ago, and I believe she might be the mother of this child." Mark nodded, jotting down notes. "Do you have any information on her? Last known address, workplace, anything that might help?" Daniel thought for a moment. "She used to work in marketing, but that was years ago. I have some old contact details, but I doubt they're still valid." "Anything helps," Mark assured him. "I'll start with what you have and see where it leads." They discussed a few more details, and Daniel felt a sense of relief knowing that Mark was on the case. He had a reputation for finding people and uncovering truths, and Daniel hoped he would do the same here. After Mark left, Daniel tried to immerse himself in work, but his mind kept wandering. The usual cadence of emails and meetings felt trivial compared to the potential life-changing revelation he faced. Even the bustling energy of his office, usually a source of motivation, seemed muted. Laura, perceptive as ever, noticed his distraction. She knocked gently on his door and entered with a cup of coffee. "You seem a bit off today. Everything all right?" Daniel appreciated her concern. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind." "Thanks, Laura." She hesitated, then spoke again. "If you need to talk or need anything, I'm here." Daniel smiled, grateful for her support. "Thanks, Laura. I might take you up on that." As the day wore on, Daniel found himself reflecting on his life and the choices that had led him here. He realized that his relentless pursuit of success had often come at the expense of personal connections. The possibility of having a son made him question his priorities, forcing him to consider what truly mattered. That evening, as the office emptied and the city lights flickered on, Daniel sat alone, contemplating his next steps. He knew he had to be patient, to wait for Mark's findings, but the anticipation was difficult to bear. The potential of having a son was a beacon. A chance to change the narrative of his life and fill the void that success had never quite managed to fill. Daniel's thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. It was Mark, with an update on his investigation. "I've got some leads," Mark said, his voice steady. "I think I might have found where Sarah is now." Daniel's heart raced. "Really? That was fast." "Yeah, I have a few contacts who helped narrow it down. I'll need a bit more time to confirm everything, but I wanted to keep you in the loop." "Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. Keep me posted." As the call ended, Daniel felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. The possibility of reconnecting with Sarah and meeting his son was becoming more real by the moment. It was a journey he hadn't anticipated, but one he was now eager to embark on, driven by the hope of forging a new chapter in his life. The next morning, Daniel awoke with a renewed sense of urgency. He was eager to hear more from Mark about Sarah's whereabouts, but he knew he needed to keep himself occupied in the meantime. As he dressed and prepared for another day at the office, his mind was a blur of anticipation and trepidation. The prospect of meeting Sarah again, and perhaps meeting his son, was both thrilling and daunting. Once at the office, Daniel tried to lose himself in his work, but each task felt like a mere distraction from the more pressing matters at hand. His phone sat on the desk, a constant reminder that news from Mark could come at any moment. He glanced at it frequently, willing it to ring with the information he so desperately sought. Around midday, as Daniel tried to focus on a particularly tedious report, his phone finally buzzed. It was a text from Mark. "Got an address. Call when you can." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. He quickly dialed Mark's number, his hands slightly trembling with anticipation. "Mark, it's Daniel. You found something?" "Yes," I confirmed Sarah's current address. "It's in a modest neighborhood, not too far from the city," Mark replied, his tone reassuring. Daniel was surprised. He had imagined Sarah living in a place that mirrored the ambitious lifestyle they once shared, but the thought of her residing in a more humble setting intrigued him. It hinted at changes he hadn't anticipated. "Can you send me the details?" Daniel asked, trying to mask his nervousness. "Of course. I'll text you the address," Mark said. "Do you want me to accompany you?" Daniel paused, considering the offer. "No, I think I should do this alone. But thank you, Mark. You've been a great help." "Any time." "Let me know how it goes," Mark replied before they ended the call. As soon as the address appeared on his phone, Daniel felt a rush of emotions. He knew he had to prepare himself, both mentally and emotionally, for what lay ahead. The idea of confronting Sarah and the possibility of having a son was overwhelming, but it was a confrontation he could no longer avoid. He decided to confide in Laura, knowing she would offer the support and perspective he needed. He called her into his office, closing the door behind her for privacy. "Laura, I need to talk to you about something," Daniel began, his voice steady but earnest. "Of course, what's going on?" Laura asked, her expression attentive. Daniel took a deep breath, then explained the situation. He told her about the envelope, the photograph, and the possibility that he might have a son. Laura listened intently, her eyes widening slightly at the revelation. "Wow, Daniel, that's a lot to take in," she said after a moment. "How are you feeling about all this?" "Honestly, I'm scared," Daniel admitted, his vulnerability evident. "I don't know what to expect. But I feel like I have to see this through." Laura nodded, her expression softening with empathy. "You're doing the right thing. And if this boy is your son, I think you'll make a great father. You've always cared deeply about the people in your life." Her words were a balm to Daniel's anxious heart, offering reassurance and strength. "Thanks, Laura. That means a lot." "Do you want me to handle anything while you're gone?" she asked, always the consummate professional. "Just keep things running smoothly." "I'll let you know how it goes," Daniel replied, grateful for her support. With Laura's encouragement bolstering his resolve, Daniel knew it was time to face the past. He left the office, his mind focused on the journey ahead. The drive to Sarah's neighborhood was filled with a mix of anticipation and reflection. As Daniel navigated the city streets, he couldn't help but think about how much had changed since he last saw Sarah. His life had become a whirlwind of success and solitude, but now he was on the brink of something profoundly different. The thought of reconnecting with Sarah and potentially meeting his son filled him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. The cityscape gradually gave way to quieter streets lined with modest homes. It was a neighborhood that exuded warmth and community, a stark contrast to the high-rise world Daniel inhabited. As he pulled up to the address Mark had provided, he took a moment to gather his thoughts, his heart pounding with anticipation. This was it. The moment he'd been simultaneously dreading and longing for. With a deep breath, Daniel stepped out of his car and approached the front door, each step a reminder of the past and a promise of what might come. He paused at the door, his hand hovering over the doorbell. This was the threshold between his old life and the new possibilities that awaited. With a final, steadying breath, Daniel pressed the bell, the sound echoing in the quiet afternoon air. As he waited, Daniel's mind raced with questions. What would he say? How would Sarah react? And most importantly, what would he find on the other side of the door? The answers were just moments away, and Daniel knew he was ready to face them, whatever they might be. Daniel stood at the door, his heart pounding louder with each passing second. He could hear faint footsteps approaching from inside, and his mind raced with what he might say. The door opened, revealing Sarah, looking much like he remembered, yet with an air of maturity and calm that time often brings. "Daniel," she said, surprise evident in her voice but not unfriendly. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Hi, Sarah," Daniel replied, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside. "I hope it's okay that I stopped by. There's something important we need to talk about." Sarah studied him for a moment, then nodded, stepping aside to let him in. "Of course, come in." Daniel entered, immediately struck by the warmth of her home. It was a simple, inviting space filled with soft colors and personal touches that spoke of a life well lived. It felt worlds apart from his own sterile, impersonal surroundings, and he couldn't help but feel a pang of longing for this kind of warmth. They settled into the living room, Sarah offering him a seat on a comfortable sofa. Daniel noticed the photos on the walls, snapshots of happy moments and family gatherings. Among them he spotted the boy from the photograph, his heart clenching at the sight. "Sarah, I received something recently that I think you should know about," Daniel began, his voice gentle but firm. He pulled out the photograph and the note, handing them to her. Sarah took them, her eyes widening slightly as she read the note. She looked up at Daniel, her expression a mix of surprise and understanding. "I see," she said softly, setting the note aside. "I suppose I should have expected something like this eventually." "Is it true?" Sarah, Daniel asked, his voice filled with a mix of hope and apprehension. "Is he my son?" She nodded, her gaze steady. "Yes, Daniel. His name is Ethan. He's your son." The confirmation sent a rush of emotions through Daniel, relief mingling with the enormity of the revelation. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, trying to keep his tone gentle, despite the weight of the question. Sarah sighed, her expression thoughtful. "When I found out I was pregnant, we had already drifted apart. You were so focused on your career, and I didn't want to disrupt your life. I thought I could handle it on my own, and for a while I did." Daniel listened, understanding but still grappling with the reality of it all. "I wish I had known. I would have wanted to be there, to be part of his life." "I know," Sarah replied, her voice softening. "And maybe I should have reached out sooner. But I wasn't sure how you would react, or if you even wanted that kind of responsibility." Daniel nodded, absorbing her words. "I understand why you did it, but I'm here now. I want to be part of Ethan's life, if you'll let me." Sarah regarded him, her eyes searching his face for sincerity. "He deserves to know his father. And if you're serious about this, then yes, I think we can find a way to make it work." Daniel felt a wave of relief at her words. a sense of hope blooming in his chest. "Thank you, Sarah. I promise I'll do everything I can to be a good father to him." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling around them. Despite the gravity of the situation, there was a sense of possibility, a chance for connection and healing that hadn't existed before. "Would you like to meet him?" Sarah asked, breaking the silence. Daniel's heart leapt at the offer. "Yes, I would love that." Sarah smiled, a genuine warmth in her expression. "He's at school right now, but he'll be home soon. Why don't you stay for dinner? We can introduce you then." Daniel agreed, grateful for the opportunity. As they spent the afternoon talking, he learned more about Ethan through Sarah's stories. Each tale painted a picture of a lively, curious boy with a love for adventure and a kind heart. As the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, the door opened and Ethan bounded in, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He stopped short when he saw Daniel, curiosity lighting up his eyes. "Ethan." "This is Daniel," Sarah said gently, a hint of anticipation in her voice. "He's someone very special I want you to meet." Daniel knelt down to Ethan's level, offering a warm smile. "Hi, Ethan. It's nice to meet you." Ethan regarded him with a mix of shyness and curiosity, then smiled back. "Hi," he said, his voice small but bright. In that moment, Daniel felt a profound connection, a sense of belonging he hadn't anticipated. It was the beginning of something new, a chance to build a relationship with his son and perhaps, in time, find a place in Sarah's life once more. As they settled into dinner, Daniel felt a sense of peace and purpose. The path ahead was uncertain, but he was ready to embrace it, driven by the hope of creating a future filled with connection and love. As Daniel sat across from Ethan at the dinner table, he marveled at the boy's energy and curiosity. Ethan chatted animatedly about his day at school, his favorite subjects, and the soccer game he was looking forward to over the weekend. Daniel listened intently, soaking in every detail, eager to learn more about his son's life. Sarah watched them interact, a soft smile playing on her lips. She seemed at ease, relieved perhaps, to see the tentative bond forming between Daniel and Ethan. The atmosphere at the table was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the sterile, solitary meals Daniel was accustomed to. "So, Ethan, I hear you like soccer," Daniel said, trying to keep the conversation flowing naturally. "Yeah, I love it," Ethan replied enthusiastically. "I'm a striker. I scored 2 goals last week." "That's impressive," Daniel said, genuinely impressed. "Maybe you can show me some of your moves sometime." Ethan's eyes lit up. "Really? That would be awesome." As dinner continued, Daniel found himself relaxing, the initial tension giving way to a genuine enjoyment of the moment. He marveled at Ethan's zest for life, his fearless embrace of the world around him. It was a reminder of the simple joys he had often overlooked in his pursuit of success. After dinner, Ethan insisted on showing Daniel his room, eager to share his collection of soccer trophies and the model airplanes he had meticulously assembled. Daniel followed, taking in the vibrant space that reflected Ethan's personality and interests. "This one is my favorite," Ethan said, pointing to a model of a sleek jet. "It took me forever to build, but it was worth it." Daniel admired the craftsmanship, touched by Ethan's enthusiasm. "You did a great job. Maybe you can teach me how to build one someday." Ethan beamed, clearly pleased by the idea. "I'd like that." As they spent time together, Daniel felt a growing sense of connection, a bond that was forming naturally and without force. It was a feeling he hadn't anticipated, but one he welcomed wholeheartedly. Later, as Ethan prepared for bed, Daniel and Sarah found themselves alone in the living room. The evening had been a success, and Daniel felt a sense of gratitude for the opportunity to be part of Ethan's life. "Thank you for letting me spend time with him," Daniel said, his voice sincere. "He's an incredible kid." Sarah smiled, a hint of pride in her expression. "He is, isn't he? I'm glad you two got along so well. Daniel nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him. I want to be there for him, Sarah. I know I have a lot to learn, but I'm committed to making this work. Sarah regarded him thoughtfully, her eyes softening. I believe you, Daniel, and I'm willing to work with you to make sure Ethan has the best of both of us. The conversation shifted to logistics and practicalities, discussing how they might integrate Daniel into Ethan's life more seamlessly. It was a conversation filled with hope and possibility, a shared commitment to doing what was best for their son. As the evening drew to a close, Daniel felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The day had been an unexpected journey into fatherhood, a role he had never imagined for himself but now embraced with open arms. It was a chance to redefine his life, to build something meaningful and lasting. Before leaving, Daniel paused at the door, turning to Sarah. Thank you, Sarah, for everything. I know this isn't easy, but I'm grateful for the chance to be part of Ethan's life. Sarah nodded, her expression warm and understanding. We're all figuring this out together. But I think we're off to a good start. With that, Daniel left, his heart full of hope and determination. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he felt ready to face it, buoyed by the promise of connection and the joy of discovering fatherhood. It was a journey that had only just begun, but one he was eager to embrace, step by step, moment by moment. The next few weeks brought a whirlwind of change for Daniel as he began to integrate himself into Ethan's life. He rearranged his schedule to make time for school events and soccer games, gradually shifting his focus from boardrooms to playgrounds. Each moment with Ethan was a revelation, offering Daniel a glimpse into a world he had long neglected. One Saturday morning, Daniel picked up Ethan for a day at the park. They had planned a picnic, and Ethan had been eager to show Daniel his favorite spot by the lake. As they drove, Ethan chattered excitedly about a new science project he was working on, his enthusiasm infectious. You'll love the park, Ethan said as they arrived. There's a huge tree we can climb and lots of space to run around. Daniel smiled, enjoying Ethan's excitement. Sounds perfect. Lead the way. They spread out a blanket under the shade of the big tree, unpacking sandwiches and snacks. The air was filled with laughter and the distant sounds of other families enjoying the day. It was a scene Daniel had often seen from afar but never been a part of until now. After lunch, Ethan challenged Daniel to a race, and they sprinted across the grass, Ethan's laughter echoing in the air. Daniel found himself caught up in the moment, the simple joy of running and laughing alongside his son a balm to his often stressed mind. You're fast, Daniel exclaimed, catching his breath as they collapsed onto the blanket. Ethan grinned, his eyes sparkling. I've been practicing. Maybe next time you'll win. Daniel chuckled, ruffling Ethan's hair. I'll have to train harder. As they rested, Ethan began showing Daniel how to skip stones across the lake. Daniel watched, impressed by Ethan's skill and patience as he explained the technique. See, you just have to get the angle right, Ethan said, demonstrating with a smooth, flat stone. Daniel tried, his first few attempts falling short but improving with each try. This is harder than it looks, he admitted, laughing. You'll get it, Ethan encouraged, his confidence infectious. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity and laughter, each moment a step toward building a stronger bond. Daniel felt a deep sense of fulfillment, a connection he hadn't realized he was missing until now. As the sun began to set, they packed up their things and headed back to the car. Daniel felt a sense of peace, the day a reminder of the simple pleasures that life had to offer. Thanks for today, Ethan, Daniel said as they drove back. I had a great time. Me too, Ethan replied, his voice warm. Can we do this again soon? Absolutely, Daniel promised, his heart full. The drive back was quiet, the comfortable silence between them speaking volumes. Daniel felt a sense of gratitude for the opportunity to be part of Ethan's life, to experience the joys and challenges of fatherhood. Back at Sarah's, Ethan bounded inside, eager to tell her about their day. Daniel lingered at the door, watching as Ethan animatedly recounted their adventures. Sarah listened, her eyes meeting Daniel's with a look of understanding and appreciation. "Thank you for today," Sarah said as she walked Daniel to the door. Ethan had a wonderful time. "So did I," Daniel replied, feeling the sincerity of his words. "I really appreciate you letting me be part of his life." Sarah nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "It's been good for him, and for you too, I think." Daniel agreed, knowing that his life had taken on a new dimension, one that was richer and more meaningful than he had ever imagined. As he drove home, he reflected on the changes he had made, the priorities he had shifted, and the connections he was building. The road ahead was still filled with challenges, but Daniel felt ready to face them. He had discovered a new purpose, a new joy in the simple act of being present and engaged in his son's life. It was a journey that had transformed him, one that promised to continue shaping his future in ways he had never anticipated. As Daniel settled into his new routine, he found himself looking forward to the weekends he spent with Ethan. Their time together was a welcome reprieve from the pressures of his corporate life, offering him a sense of balance that had been missing for far too long. Daniel's colleagues noticed the change in him too. He was more relaxed, more present, and somehow more effective in his role as CEO. One Friday afternoon, as Daniel was wrapping up another busy week at the office, he received a call from Sarah. Her voice was cheerful, a hint of excitement coloring her words. "Hey Daniel, I was wondering if you'd like to join us for Ethan's school play tomorrow. He's been working really hard on it, and I know he'd love for you to be there." Daniel didn't hesitate. "I'd love to come. What time should I be there?" "It's at 2 in the afternoon. They're performing the Jungle Book. Ethan's playing Baloo, and he's really excited about it." Daniel could hear the pride in Sarah's voice, and it resonated with him. "I'll be there. Thanks for inviting me." The next day, Daniel arrived at the school auditorium, a bouquet of flowers in hand for Ethan. The room buzzed with the chatter of parents and the excited energy of children preparing for their big performance. Daniel found a seat near the front, eager to see Ethan in action. As the lights dimmed and the curtain rose, Daniel watched with anticipation. The children took the stage, their voices filling the room with the familiar tale of friendship and adventure. When Ethan appeared as Baloo, Daniel couldn't help but smile, his heart swelling with pride. Ethan was a natural, his enthusiasm and joy evident in every line and gesture. Daniel marveled at his son's confidence, the way he embraced the role with such gusto. It was a side of Ethan he hadn't fully seen before, and it filled him with admiration. After the play, the audience erupted into applause, and Daniel joined in, clapping until his hands stung. As the children took their bows, he caught Ethan's eye, giving him a thumbs up and a broad smile. Once the performance concluded, Daniel made his way through the crowd to find Ethan. When he finally reached him, Ethan's face lit up with excitement. "You were amazing," Ethan, Daniel said, handing him the bouquet. "I'm so proud of you." Ethan beamed, accepting the flowers with a grin. "Thanks, Daniel. Did you like the show?" "I loved it. You were the best Baloo I've ever seen," Daniel replied, ruffling Ethan's hair affectionately. Sarah joined them, her eyes shining with pride. "You did such a great job, Ethan. We're both so proud of you." Ethan hugged her, then Daniel, his happiness contagious. "Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Daniel." As they left the school, Daniel felt a deep sense of contentment. The day had been a reminder of the simple yet profound joys of family and connection. It was moments like these that made the challenges of balancing his corporate responsibilities with his personal life worthwhile. Later, as they sat together at a nearby cafe celebrating the successful performance with milkshakes and fries, Daniel reflected on how much his life had changed since discovering he had a son. The transformation had been subtle yet profound, shifting his perspective and priorities in ways he hadn't anticipated. "Are you coming to my soccer game next weekend?" Ethan asked between sips of his milkshake, his eyes hopeful. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Daniel promised, glad to have these commitments to look forward to. Sarah watched their interaction with a smile, clearly pleased with how things were progressing. "It's nice to see you two getting along so well." Daniel nodded, grateful for the opportunity to be part of Ethan's life. "I'm really enjoying it. Thank you for welcoming me in." As they finished their treats and prepared to head home, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path he was on was not one he had foreseen, but it was one he embraced wholeheartedly. It was a path filled with challenges and joys, with the promise of deeper connections and a richer life. Driving home that evening, Daniel couldn't help but think about the future. He was committed to being there for Ethan, to building a relationship that would last a lifetime. It was a journey that required patience and effort, but one he was ready to undertake with enthusiasm and love. The road ahead was still unfolding, but with each step, Daniel felt more certain of his place in Ethan's life and more grateful for the unexpected gift of fatherhood. It was a journey of discovery, not just of his son, but of himself and the man he was becoming. The following week, Daniel found himself more deeply entrenched in the rhythm of his new life, juggling the demands of his business with the joys of fatherhood. At work, he noticed a shift in his leadership style. He was more patient, more willing to listen, and his team responded positively to the change. His weekends, once filled with solitary activities, were now eagerly anticipated for the time he would spend with Ethan. One evening, as Daniel was wrapping up his day at the office, he received a call from Sarah. Her voice was calm but carried a note of concern. "Daniel, I wanted to talk to you about something," she began. "Ethan's been asking a lot of questions about you, about why you weren't around when he was younger." Daniel paused, the weight of her words sinking in. "I see. What have you told him?" "I've tried to explain it in a way he'll understand, that sometimes adults make decisions that seem right at the time. But things change," Sarah replied, her tone thoughtful. "But I think it would be good if you talked to him about it too." Daniel nodded, understanding the importance of being honest with Ethan. "You're right. I'll talk to him this weekend. He deserves to know." As the weekend approached, Daniel prepared himself for the conversation, unsure of how Ethan would react but determined to be open and truthful. He knew it was an important step in building trust and strengthening their relationship. On Saturday, they headed to the park again, this time with a soccer ball in tow. After a spirited game, they sat on the grass, catching their breath and enjoying the sunny afternoon. "Ethan, can we talk about something important?" Daniel asked, keeping his tone light yet serious. Ethan looked up, curiosity in his eyes. "Sure, what's up?" Daniel took a deep breath. "I know you've been wondering why I wasn't around when you were younger. I want to explain it to you." Ethan nodded, his attention focused on Daniel. "When your mom and I were together, I was really focused on my work. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I didn't realize what I was missing out on," Daniel began, choosing his words carefully. "I didn't know about you until recently, and I regret not being there from the start." Ethan listened quietly, processing Daniel's words. "So you didn't know?" "No, I didn't," Daniel said, his voice earnest. "If I had, I would have wanted to be part of your life from the beginning." Ethan seemed to consider this, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I'm glad you're here now." Daniel felt a surge of relief, grateful for Ethan's understanding. "Me too, Ethan. I'm going to do my best to be there for you from now on." They sat together in comfortable silence, the conversation a step toward healing and deeper connection. Daniel felt a weight lift from his shoulders, the honesty between them a foundation for the future. As they packed up to leave, Ethan turned to Daniel with a smile. "Can we get ice cream on the way home?" "Of course," Daniel replied, glad to return to the lighter, easygoing moments they shared. I think we've earned it after that soccer game. The rest of the day passed in a blur of laughter and simple pleasures. As they enjoyed their ice cream cones, Daniel marveled at how far they had come in such a short time. The bond between them was growing stronger, each shared experience adding to the tapestry of their relationship. Back at Sarah's, Ethan excitedly recounted their day, his eyes shining with happiness. Daniel watched, his heart full of gratitude for the chance to be part of these moments. Before leaving, Daniel spoke with Sarah, sharing the details of their conversation. I told him the truth, as best as I could, he said, feeling a sense of accomplishment. Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. Thank you for doing that. It's important for him to hear it from you. Daniel agreed, knowing that honesty and openness were key to building a lasting relationship with Ethan. As he drove home, he reflected on the day's events, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. The journey of fatherhood was proving to be one of the most rewarding experiences of his life. It was teaching him about patience, about love, and about the importance of being present. And as he navigated this new path, Daniel felt more certain than ever that he was exactly where he needed to be.